This is A New Angle, a show about cool people doing awesome things in and around Montana. I'm your host, Justin Angle. This show is supported by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. Hey folks, welcome back, and thanks for tuning in. Today, I'm speaking with Rafael Chacon, professor of art history at the University of Montana and director of the Montana Museum of Art and Culture.
It's a remarkable museum. It's now over 130 years old. It's a museum that has always been associated with the University of Montana. It is the state's, as you mentioned, the state's largest and deepest art collection.
The MMAC is one of 3 state museums and holds the state's oldest, largest, and deepest collection of art. Rafael, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us, where did you grow up and what did your parents do?
I grew up in Northwest Indiana. I was born in Cuba.
Okay.
Born and almost raised there.
What's the story from getting from Cuba to Hammond, Indiana?
Well, it's a long, convoluted story.
Okay.
To summarize, my family settled in the North when they came here, and my family started emigrating after the Cuban Revolution of 1958. So throughout the 60s, various branches of the family migrated north, and they went to places like Detroit. We landed in Detroit first in 1970.
Wow, that is a big swap from Cuba to Detroit.
And in fact, it was December when we arrived.
Oof.
I had never seen snow in my entire life.
Well, we could probably do an entire series of podcasts on that story. We'll save that for another day. How did you get interested in art? When did it start to capture you?
I would say there's no organic reason for my being interested in art. I mean, there were no artists in my family. We rarely visited museums as a family, but as a kid living just outside of Chicago, museums and art were a huge part of my development.
Yeah.
So I tell people that we used to ditch school because we had a commuter train that dead-ended just beneath the Art Institute of Chicago. So in high school, we used to leave school with friends and just head up into the city. It was cheap. And so the Art Institute of Chicago became like a playground for us. As a child, I was always interested in art, and I thought of myself as a would-be artist.
Yeah.
But it was really those trips to the Art Institute of Chicago that kind of formed this interest in museums and interest in art, contemporary art, older art.
So you get your PhD at University of Chicago, prestigious institution. How do you then make your way to Montana?
The job was here.
Yeah.
So I went out on the job market. I was ABD,
all but dissertation.
Right. I was a couple months shy of defending my dissertation. And I was kicked out of the nest, so to speak. I was told by my partner then that you have to go out and test yourself, see if you're marketable.
Okay.
And of course, the market was pretty squishy back then with academic jobs and a full-time tenure track academic jobs in art history. So it was a good idea to just, even without the PhD in hand, to go out and see what was available. And I applied for 10 jobs. Number 10 was Miyazaki, Japan.
Wow.
Number 9 was Missoula, Montana. And they could have been in the same place at that point because both were enigmas to me.
Had you been to Montana at all before?
Never.
Okay.
Never been farther west than Kansas City. So
Yet you've stayed here a long time.
Oh my God.
What's kept you here?
Oh, what didn't keep me here? When I arrived, I immediately took to this place. I had 5 callbacks from those 10 jobs. So I was traveling and interviewing all over the country, some places in the South, some places back east. And then the last one was here in Missoula, Montana. And when I landed here, I thought, wow, this is paradise. I just fell in love with the place.
There's a lot to why it's a great place to live. But why is it a great place to build a career as a budding art historian and critic?
At that point, and we're talking now 30 years ago, art history was a field that was in huge transition, but it was coming into the public consciousness as an important subject. The museums actually were pretty dormant prior to the 1980s. And then in the 80s, they had this incredible revolution, a kind of renaissance, if you will. Museums started rebuilding. People, I think, became conscious of how important art collections are in their lives. And coming to the rural West was a personal adventure, first of all. But secondly, there was a challenge in bringing the knowledge that I had from growing up in Chicago, and I did an internship at the Met in New York City. I mean, I've traveled a lot in my life as a young person, and I thought I had something to offer. I thought I had these great Western traditions and also global traditions that I could share. And what I found in Montana, which I didn't necessarily find in all those other job opportunities around the country, was this avid interest in the outside world, in art historical traditions. And And I found a department here at the University of Montana that was open to my teaching a whole range of different subjects, Western, non-Western art. As long as I taught contemporary art and taught what was actually happening today, they were happy for me to teach any version of art history that I wanted to. And that sense of carte blanche that I had was really a gift.
Yeah.
And I ran with it. And I have had a fantastic career, in my opinion, doing that here.
Excellent. So you are an expert in something known as vexillology. You're going to have to fact check me on that pronunciation, but what is vexillology and why should we care about it?
Oh, it's such a vexing question.
Oh gosh, I set you up for that one.
No, vexillology derives from the Latin vexillum, which is the word for flag.
Flag.
So vexillology is the formal or the academic study of flags. I have always been interested in flags ever since I was a kid. It intersected beautifully with my discipline, which is art history.
Okay.
Flags as signs, flags as symbols, flags as ideological statements, as works of design. So they're works of art.
Do you have a favorite flag?
Oh, I have lots of favorite flags.
Sure.
But more than that, I have lots of flags I don't like.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, would you share any of these favorites or the ones you don't like?
Sure. I'll give you a political answer.
Okay.
I don't like the Montana state flag.
And
and
tell me why.
I know there are a lot of people who love that flag because it's our flag, but that flag is at the very bottom of like poorly designed flags. There's a class of flags that have very little creativity to them and they're difficult to read. The Montana flag is what they call a seal on a bed sheet because it's the simplest formula for state flags.
Yes.
It's a blue field and they plop the state seal on it. And a lot of states did that, by the way, as they were coming into statehood 100 plus years ago. It was a very uncreative act. The state recognized that it was a poor flag because it was constantly confused with other state flags that had exactly the same formula.
Okay.
And so they added the word Montana. And one of the rules of good flag design is you don't add words to flags.
Flags shouldn't have words.
Flags should not need words.
Oh,
You should be able to read the flag from both sides. The seal is virtually illegible from a distance. One of my favorite flags, to answer your earlier question, is the Colorado state flag.
Okay.
It has a big C in the middle of it, so it doesn't have a word, but it has a C.
The C with the sun theme to it.
Poking through it. You see that flag, you immediately know it's Colorado. And that's the kind of flag that Montana needs.
Yeah, flags as brands. As you were talking about these design principles, it's a bit of art, but it's also kind of a marketing project too. I'm seeing some overlap in our sensibilities here, Rafael.
Yes, it is a marketing project. And actually, I think the states that have changed their flags of late have understood that and have moved. And of course, a flag should have some connections to the history of the place, to the people of the place, the values of the place. But flags really do need to represent the people. They need to represent their values. And they should be so visually stimulating that you know immediately what it refers to. So I think we have a challenge ahead of us. How do we rebrand the state? How do we say who we are through a new flag? I'd love to see that project come to fruition.
Yeah. How big a constituency is there for this effort of yours?
Probably about 4 people.
4 people? Well, that's a start, right? So you, for the last 5 years, have been the director of the Montana Museum of Art and Culture, affectionately known as the MMAC. Tell us about the MMAC. What is it? Why does it exist?
Well, it's a remarkable museum. It's now over 130 years old. It's a museum that has always been associated with the University of Montana. It is the state's, as you mentioned, the state's largest and deepest art collection. It is a world-class collection, and it's a global collection. It doesn't just represent great American art, great Western art, but it also has a huge collection of art from Asia, from Africa, from all over the world.
Okay.
So if you think about the Metropolitan Museum of Art or the Louvre or the great museums of the world, this is a mini version of that. We have things from ancient Greek pots to Andy Warhol. And of course, it's a university collection, so it's a teaching collection. It's a research institution. And it's an institution that in some ways has suffered all of the indignities of being attached to an institution like the University of Montana, the highs and lows.
Sure.
In some eras, there was a great deal of collecting activity and teaching with the collection and exhibitions. And in other areas, depending on the social, political, economic climate, it waned. Its influence waned. The institution has also suffered from not having a permanent home, so it was kicked around the campus for many decades. We are in a great time now because the university is committed to featuring this institution and these resources that really belong to the people of Montana. This is an amazing collection that belongs to all of us.
talk about the new home. The building is beautiful, located in the north zone of campus. It's been open, a little over a year now, a year and a half?
We opened in September 2023.
Okay, year and a half. So yeah, talk about the new building.
We owe a lot to A&E Architects who designed the building, a local architectural firm. They really saw the potential of a building and this surrounded by a big parking lot on the north end of campus as an opportunity to make a cultural statement. And I remember the conversations when we talked about the building being a piece of sculpture.
Yeah.
And so they designed the building to be beautiful from all angles, to be seen in the third dimension fully as a piece of sculpture. But more importantly, the building works for our collections. It's designed so that a visitor can come in and see what the museum does, visually what our work is about, and at the same time enjoy the art.
Sure.
And enjoy it in the span of an hour to two. So we didn't want to design a building that would tax the viewer, as so many museums do. Either it's too much, it's overwhelming. Museums tend to be labyrinths that you have to navigate with a map and a lot of assistance. And so it's a very accessible facility.
And I love that it's set among the Performing Arts Center, the Adams Center, the Washington Grizzlies Stadium, like all of these spaces where we can put the university's public-facing activities and opportunities to engage with the public on widely different dimensions, sort of in the same space. There's some elegance to that, I think.
Yeah, I give a lot of credit to that idea to President Bodnar. When we were talking about that location, that parking lot on the north side of campus, we were aware that we were actually complementing a corridor, which he now calls an arts and entertainment corridor, because we have the Adams Center right across the street from us on Campus Drive, the Performing Arts and Television Center to our south. And then all of these things are linked together on this Memorial Row that takes you to the heart of the campus. And we also we discovered that Memorial Row has the highest foot traffic and bicycle traffic on anywhere on the campus. Wow. It is a major entryway from across the river and town into the university campus. Now people see us visibly, and they identify then the arts with athletics, with entertainment, with the performance and theater events and dance that are happening to our south. So we really are part of a new entry and a new corridor that really features the arts and performance for the university.
Absolutely. Talk about the work of a museum director. What is your charge, and how do you make choices about what goes in the museum, what doesn't? When you're talking about collections, that's from the verb to collect. How do you go about collecting things?
The director's responsibility is not just the safety of the art collections and making those things accessible, but I was thinking immediately fundraising, because so much of the activities of a director is really to make sure that the institution is financially stable and that you have the means by which to do the programming that you want. The New York Times a few years ago did a really amazing piece about museum directors, and it described our profession as an octopus. There's so many arms, tentacles that a director has to have in play. And so what I think of is that there are directions that an institution like a museum could take. And the healthiest museums have very active educational programming, very active research collections, very active exhibitions programs. Sometimes they do the stuff of community organized place. They become community centers, hubs for a lot of different activities. And in some ways, a director has to decide what are the priorities of this institution. So in the case of the Montana Museum of Art and Culture, our first priority was to that collection, because we have, again, this superb collection, an amazing state resource, and that hasn't been taken care of very well, certainly not housed well. And so our first priority was to make sure that collection was safe and in good condition, and in a condition in which the public could interact with it, and students could research it, and classes could use it in their pedagogy. So the first responsibility was to that collection. And then to make sure that our programming around that collection was robust, so that you have the proper staff, you have people actually using the collection and making it available.
We'll be back to my conversation with Rafael Chacón after this short break. A New Angle is proudly presented by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. This show does not happen without these pillars of our community, and I'm so grateful for their support and encouragement. And speaking of support, have you checked out our new website yet? anewanglepodcast.com. There you can support our show directly with a variety of subscription options. Subscribers get access to bonus episodes, additional segments, writings, and other benefits. So check it out at anewanglepodcast.com.
Hi, this is Sheila Stearns, Commissioner Emerita of the Montana University System and former president of the University of Montana. You are listening to one of my favorite podcasts, A New Angle.
Welcome back to A New Angle. I'm speaking with Rafael Chacon, director of the Montana Museum of Art and Culture. So you mentioned fundraising. You and I share a friendship and share gratitude for Michelle and Lauren Hansen. They're supporting a new exhibition at the MMAC called 19 Under 39, the Michelle and Lauren Hansen Biennial Exhibition. Talk about this new project and how it came to be.
It's an amazing project, but first let me say something about Michelle and Lauren.
Please.
These folks are amazing friends, and they are such good alumni.
Yeah.
They are so loyal to this institution, but also to our state. And they have an awareness of how important, how vital the arts are in the state. They surprised us a few years ago with, it was Michelle who came up with this idea that she wanted to support the museum and she wanted to support our collections. And of course, most of our collection comes as gifts from individuals. So it's grown mostly as bequests and donations. But one of the problems that we have is we have very little money to acquire new art and to stay current. And one of our missions is, in fact, to collect the art of contemporary artists, whether they are a part of this community, students, faculty, artists in the community. And so they were concerned that we really couldn't grow. 19 Under 39 was a solution for that. And it's an ingenious idea. This is an exhibition that happens every 2 years. It's an invitational show. So we basically invite artists within the ages of 19 and 39, so it's a younger generation of artists, to compete for top prizes.
Okay.
And those are purchase prizes. So the top 3 awards then enter the museum's collection.
Okay.
So this is a way for us to stay current, not only to exhibit a cross-section of what's happening in the state in terms of our visual arts, but it's also a way for the museum's collection to stay apace with new developments in the visual arts.
Sure. And are all the participants Montana artists?
They are Montana artists. So
Wonderful.
We are, through this exhibition, we're supporting young Montana artists. And they range, and the submissions were amazing because it really was an enormous cross-section from here to Glendive, from Missoula to Glendive, of younger artists, some of them just out of high school, some of them just out of college, some of them still in college. And then artists in their 20s and 30s who are very serious about what they're doing. And so not only to see their art, but to hear what they're interested in doing, how they express who they are and the role of art in their lives, that's really exciting. So we have the 19 artists now. We're currently curating the exhibition. So this exhibition is running through the end of September. Mm-hmm. So it'll be on view throughout the summer and into early fall. And it'll give us a chance to actually see the remarkable output of these younger artists across the state.
Is there any commentary you can provide on, what younger people are thinking about with their art, or is there anything noteworthy about this younger generation of artists that's coming forth in Montana?
I think when you enter the gallery and see this exhibition, what you'll see is an enormous diversity of not just materials and types of works of art. So we have colossal sculptures and very intimate prints and beautiful paintings, really inventive use of materials. But you'll also see this incredible range of themes. Some of the themes are very quiet and very personal. Mm-hmm. Others are very vocal and very political even. And what is true is that young artists today are very aware that they're not just living in Montana and rural places, that they are part of a much larger world. And so we tend to think of Montana as provincial because of our rural nature. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that the visual arts show us that we're not. Those artists, no matter their age, are connected to the rest of the world in very powerful, significant ways. And I think they're also challenging what they're hearing and reading and what they're encountering in the world.
So you mentioned some of the winners, their work will be brought into the permanent collection. For the purposes of this exhibition, however, how many pieces are being displayed?
There are 19 artists, and some of the artists have multiple pieces.
Great.
Some of the artists have one piece that has multiple parts. So it depends on the nature of the art that the artist makes. They were all selected by a selection committee, a statewide committee.
Yeah. That has to be quite a project, putting together a committee and also thinking of the selection criteria. That has to be a daunting endeavor.
That was a fun endeavor to gather people around the state who represent different communities, but who also know the lay of the land in terms of the arts in the state. To have them look at this cross section of artists and then to whittle it down to 19, and then from that to whittle it down to 3 artists who are representing this generation. That's a real challenge, but it was also a lot of fun. And I think they enjoyed the process.
We all think we lived in interesting times. It's arguable that this time is particularly interesting. There's a high degree of political polarization. There seems to be these political coalitions that are fracturing and reorganizing and reshuffling, and a lot of focus on culture war. It seems like just a rich landscape for artists at the moment. Given your knowledge of art history, how do you sort of think about these moments in history, these moments of sort of social and political upheaval and the sort of art that comes from them?
I think it's fair to say that we're in a very unstable period.
Okay.
But I would say in the visual arts, we've been unstable for at least 20 years. I mean, we've been in this postmodern world where the old standards and the old definitions of what it meant to be great or to be a genius or to be the artist of the time, that those things have gone by the wayside. The landscape in the visual arts has become much more varied and contentious even, I would say. So what is happening today politically is not new to the art world. For the last, I'd say, 20 or 30 years, the art world hasn't had a clear direction. Andy Warhol said that every artist gets 15 minutes of fame. I like to say that today they get 15 nanoseconds of fame, if that.
Yeah.
Think about how memes come and go. But the political landscape has shifted dramatically, and we don't know where it's going. I worry, of course, about arts funding.
Sure.
How much of a role will the state continue to play in the arts? So the funding streams that that institutions like ours have depended on for many years may or may not be around 5 years from now. We don't know. So there is that kind of sense of instability. On the other hand, I also think that, like I said, for artists, this is not an unusual predicament. Artists are always trying to figure out what the market is doing, what the market wants, how they intersect with that. They have to make a decision whether they're going to make art for themselves or whether and they have the resources to do that, or whether they're going to make art for a certain kind of demographic or certain population, certain set of patrons. Artists are always trying to figure that out. I do think, though, that if there has been complacency, it's been around the idea that everybody has a shot at it. That may shift. It may not be true that every artist has a chance at success.
Yeah.
How artists define success may not look like the way we traditionally define success. For example, an artist who sells most of their work not in an art gallery, not through museums and galleries, but rather sells stuff online is in a place than an artist who relied on schlepping paintings around or walking with a portfolio into gallery after gallery. These things, they might be we might see them as negative, but we could also see them as new opportunities.
I mean, think of some of those forces that you outline are playing out in journalism, in the sort of visual media, like television and movies, and like the way content is shifting with the streaming era and all the TikTok and all of these forces.
Yeah.
I could see how they would generalize to the art world as well.
Ideologically, the landscape is also all over the map.
Yeah.
We're not in a renaissance where we're all aiming for the same set of social and political ideas. Artists are all over the map. There are artists who are making art for themselves, strictly for private delectation, for their own pleasure, their own needs, their own psychological needs, whatever. And there are artists who are catering to different branches of the market. There are artists who are working out there because they have a community of people interested in what they have to say. There are also artists who are very politically active, both left and right, who are making social statements. And to your earlier question, it is a kind of chicken and egg thing. Is the pivot that's happening politically impacting the art, or is the art impacting the politics of the day? I mean, we don't really know where that lands. And I think it's probably a bit of both. Just a little anecdote. I was in Mexico City late in 2024. I was able to see a lot of the art of the Mexican muralists from the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. This was a generation of artists. The most famous ones, of course, are Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo and Jose Clemente Orozco. I mean, these are the big, the muralists. They were very much in lockstep with the politics of their day. In fact, many of them were recalled from abroad to come and create these incredible murals, create art that redefined Mexico for a new state, a new political order. The government played a huge role in that. It was a socialist government, and it was very much about revising Mexican history, changing the politics of the day through this art. And they did it on a grand scale. I mean, all these public buildings, all these monuments are decorated with a revision of Mexican history, a retelling of that history.
Right.
A history that now elevated the Indian, elevated the mestizo, it elevated the poor. It educated the poor, which was mostly illiterate and landless, about who they were in this new Mexico. That was remarkable. But I think in this world today, where the arts are so varied and so contentious, and they represent such pockets of communities and people around the planet, it's hard to see how a style, a certain set of ideas, political or otherwise or social, that those ideas could in fact be embraced by the nation or by the whole world.
I love the prospect of a shared story, and not necessarily monoculture, but a shared project. I feel like some notion of a shared project in this country is fractured, and it's harder to tell in our media environment. And the notion that art can play a role in even in a fractured world, bringing together some story of cohesion is an exciting idea.
Yeah, the humanist in me wants to see a new art that is about unity. It's about democracy.
Yeah.
It's about the validation of the individual in a society. Yeah, that's what I'd love to see in the arts.
Rafael, one of the things I love most about you is not only your enthusiasm, but you talk about art in a way that's accessible. It can be intimidating for folks. Make the case for a visit to the MMAC. Why can it be a place that even a newcomer to art would want to go and see and experience?
First of all, if you want to experience art, great art, in a kind of quiet environment, in a way that you can just approach things on your own, ask your own set of questions, this is a great place to do that.
Yeah.
But if you also want art that's going to challenge you, that's going to knock your socks off, that's going to stimulate you and ask you questions, this is also a great place to do that. And it's an easy access museum. It's free. You can come in any day after noon, Tuesday through Saturday, and see what's there. And again, I'd like to think that we are about making this resource available to people in a way that is easy for them. And they can get involved then at any level that they want after that.
Sure. Rafael, thanks so much for being here, telling us about the MMAC and all the great things you do, giving us an education about flags. Yeah, we'll see how the effort to redesign the Montana flag goes, but I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Justin. Thanks
for listening to A New Angle. If you like what we do and want to support us directly, please consider a subscription at anewanglepodcast.com. A New Angle is recorded at Studio 49. A generous gift from UM alums Michelle and Lauren Hansen. Our presenting sponsors are First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. Keely Larson is our producer. Maddie Jordan is our production assistant. VTO, Jeff Ament, and John Wicks made our music. And Jeff Meese is our master of all things sound. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.